Hello, welcome to Insight Today. We're speaking with Lucy DeRosa. Lucy is the executive director of the Sargent Shriver Peace Institute in New York. She's been with the Institute for 10 years, and her original position was as communications director. Currently, she continues to serve as communications director and also serves as executive director. She takes that position over from the founding director, Jamie Price. There are three areas that we'll talk about today, areas of work that the Institute's involved in. The first is curating and publishing the transcripts and some video recordings of Sargent Shriver's speeches. He gave many speeches over the years, and they're becoming available on the website. The other area is publishing. The founding director, Jamie Price, has written a book with Ken Melchin entitled Spiritualizing Politics Without Politicizing Religion. He followed that up with a book that he wrote on his own, and that's The Call, Sargent Shriver's Realistic Politics. The Institute is also working on a third publication, which perhaps would come out next year. It's a memoir of Sargent Shriver and the War on Poverty. The book will be called We Call It War, and ideally it would be available to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the declaration of the War on Poverty. So besides the archives and the publications, the Institute's also involved in community outreach. They continue to foster, promote the legacy of Sargent Shriver, and also create new opportunities for cooperation, collaboration, for social outreach. Notably, one of these areas of outreach involves training in conflict management or conflict negotiation, using the work of Ken Melchin and Cheryl Picard on the insight approach to conflict mediation. Well, thank you for speaking with me, Lucy. And I guess, can you give us maybe a basic overview of the Institute itself and what's going on these days?
Sure. Well, the Institute was founded in 2006 by Jamie Price, whom you've spoken with before. And at the time, Sargent Shriver was still alive. So with all the programming that Jamie was able to develop and all the thinking and research about Sargent Shriver actually involved Sargent Shriver for a period of time, which was obviously a very valuable thing. Jamie, over time, developed programming at different universities. And I think the most recent one was the University of Chicago Institute of Politics, a program for leadership modeled after Sargent Shriver. He used the insight approach for that to kind of break down for students Sargent Shriver's approach to building the Peace Corps specifically. That was done for 3 years at the University of Chicago. And so he continued with that. And then 10 years ago, I came in at first part-time, and I developed the public face of the Institute. So we got a new website, and we started a social media presence on Twitter and on Facebook. And I developed the quote of the week, which actually continues to be a cornerstone in many ways, where we take the words of Sargent Shriver and more I use them to apply to a contemporary issue, because he really was, this is easy to say, but I truly do believe it after studying his work for all these years. He really was ahead of his time. And so that has become kind of a big continuing effort with the Peace Institute. And so, and now we're trying to expand our communications and our outreach, and we've branched out into publications. Jamie Price, our founding director, has published 2 books, the second of which has come out just recently, The Call, the Spiritual Realism of Sargent Shriver, and we have actually published that ourselves. And we have a third book coming out soon, end of next year, end of this year, beginning of next year. We called it A War, which is actually an unpublished memoir that Sargent Shriver himself wrote about the war on poverty. So this
Oh.
is kind of where we've been and where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just continuing to really think about Sargent Shriver's approach to leadership and to tackling issues like racism and polarization.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And so you personally came in as outreach director, or you were involved in outreach and media presence. How did you get involved yourself?
I actually was at the time the executive director of a different organization, of a theater company, and it was through Jamie has various links to theater, and we had recruited him to be the head of the board of that company. And I anyway, I that wasn't a full-time position, so I was looking for other work. And I just casually one day said to him, I'm looking for other work. And he said to me, oh, someone I work with is retiring. Maybe we can bring you in. And I had a
Okay.
small role doing social media, and it just developed from there.
So the theater work, and I understand that theater work it's still going on in New York, right? There's still a something. Are you still involved with that, or have you left that? And
I am in some ways, and actually the theater work was not the theater work that introduced me to the inside approach, but there is theater work that involves the inside approach that I was involved in, and that I am still involved in to an extent with Taya Artistry, and that's Viev Price's company. And
okay,
she's actually, just since I know Insight is one of our topics, just to give a shout out to Viev and Insight. She's done tremendous work actually applying Insight to theater.
okay, and that's the Taya. It
That's
Taya.
right.
Is it
That's
Taya
right.
Production? Taya. What's the
Taya
full name?
Artistry.
Taya Artistry.
Artistry.
Okay, right. Sorry, I forgot. And that's not part of the SSI, but it is something that similar people are involved in. There's some crossover
Yes,
and
yes. In
crossover
fact,
ideas too.
yes, I would, and even just in the development of the inside approach, which I'm less involved in, but definitely, because Jamie and Viev are partners, right? So I think they've done a lot of work together, and then in their individual spheres of
Okay.
knowledge to develop the actual inside approach itself. Yeah,
And this is the inside approach to conflict resolution, conflict
that's
management. Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
And so a lot of the work has been a lot of work on the archives, I understand is finished. I've heard you say before you have 90% of the speeches up and available on the website.
That's
And
right.
are the speeches available in audio or in transcript form or both? What's available there?
We have a small percentage of the speeches that are actually available on video and as a transcript. And then we have a few that are also audio and transcript. We have a few available, or we have a few audio files that we haven't yet put on the website, just because we haven't had the resources. And I'm sure if we did have the resources that we could find more video,
Okay.
because Sargent Shriver gave so many speeches. We have hundreds of them, right? It was something that he loved to do, and it was something that he was good at. He was himself a great communicator. And so I'm sure there's plenty of video footage out there, at universities. He loved to speak at with graduating students, and was invited to many, many ceremonies. So there's a lot that's out there, but that's just not on the website. But many, I would say most of the transcripts are there.
And I'm kind of fascinated by this. You've read through a lot of his speeches. So you've read and heard so much of Sargent Shriver's prose and his and been present to his images and arguments. What effect has that had on you?
I think it really has influenced me. I mean, honestly, this is going to sound schlocky, but it's true. I think that I've become a more compassionate person. And I've really grown to value, I've seen the importance of service in a different way, and the importance of being aware of politics, and knowing what our political leaders are doing, and being involved with that, the importance of voting. All this time, I have not been a US citizen because I'm an immigrant to this country. So I only became a citizen in 2021. And as I was going along, learning more and more about Sargent Shriver, it really became more and more distressing to me that I could not vote.
Oh, wow.
So
Interesting.
finally, in 2021, I became a citizen and was finally able to exercise my right to vote. So it's been interesting. Like, I could feel it building up in me. And the fact that I couldn't do this thing that citizens could do became more and more of an issue for me over the years.
Wow.
And I know it was because of, at least in large part, because of this work.
So being immersed in his speeches has really helped you shape your identity
I would
and
say
your
so.
goals
Yeah.
and understanding of service, sense of even your sense of participation in belonging to this country.
Yes, yes. In fact, I would say I would definitely agree with that. And I would go further. I think that I have learned so much about the history of the United States in some way through Sargent Shriver.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Because definitely about the 20th century, because that's when he lived and worked, and he was a part of so many pivotal moments in 20th century history. From the fact that he was a World War II veteran, he was in the Battle of Guadalcanal, to the fact that he was involved in desegregation in Chicago in the 1950s, and then the fact that he created the Peace Corps and led the war on poverty. He worked for these presidents who were giants, and still some of the best known presidents, US presidents in the world. But then also, he talks about the promise of the Declaration of Independence and how we haven't lived up to that promise. So it really made me think about the whole history of the country and the myths around the history of the country, and what we can do and need to continue to do in order to truly achieve the promise of the United States and the potential of the United States.
Wow. So you've made all of these speeches available in one place for people also who may also want to be sort of become immersed in his thoughts and speeches as well. What are their hopes, or like when the archives are kind of pulled together finally, what would be the next step? How would these be used? Where would is the Institute planning on going anywhere with the speeches after that?
I think that it would be great to continue to model Sargent Shriver as a convener of activists and thinkers and problem solvers, to do that on a larger and larger scale, right? Sargent Shriver, he convened religious leaders from the Muslim community, the Jewish community, and the Christian community to talk about the conflict in the Middle East. He convened religious leaders and political leaders to talk about denuclearization. I think because we have all these materials and we have them as jump off points, we can look at what he did and what he said. We can look at his platforms from his presidential campaign, which we have, for example, which is not on the website, by the way, not yet. We can look at things like that, and then we can think about, well, what did he accomplish by thinking about things in this way? What were the gaps in what was accomplished, and what more can we do that's new, that fills in those gaps? So it's to look at his great accomplishments, but also to see, because as all leaders, all great thinkers are limited in different ways, and they're also limited by the time and by the environment that they're in. So there's always more to learn, and there are always new things that can be done and that can be tried. So it is about kind of recovering the thought from the past that's valuable, but it's also about discovering the lessons that we can learn from what was done so we can think about new things as well.
I was thinking about that as you were talking, that it's archives, but it's not archives in any kind of sort antiquarian sense. It's not just preserving the past, but you see, you've experienced in going through these speeches and hearing them a personal transformation yourself in your own personality. And what you see in his speeches are the opportunity for them to serve as catalysts for kind of communal transformation, for
Yes,
bringing people together in a new way.
I would say so. And I think that it is important to think about history in this way in general. And I actually think if we link what you and I are saying right now to what's happening out there in American society, there is a movement to suppress history and to censor history, like the history of Black Americans, the history of slavery. There are efforts in almost every state to suppress, right, history books,
Mm-hmm.
books about culture. And I think there's a threat there for innovation and revolution and coming together and realizing that we actually truly are connected. And there are people who are threatened by that. So that also means I think that there is great power
Mm-hmm.
and potential for transformation in that. So that's the way I would like us to think about Sargent Shriver as a potentially, I think that there are limits to looking at history as like, oh, let's look at the great people of the past. Let's look at what they have done. I think we need to look at history to understand what brought us here, because it very much is what brings us here and what sometimes keeps us trapped in systems that don't work for everyone. And so I think to look at history in a way that allows us to envision, a future that's more just and more peaceful for all of us, I think is the way to go.
And it strikes me the subtitle, as you mentioned, of Jamie's new book, The Call, it's Sargent Shriver's practical spirituality. And
Yes,
there's a
yes.
way in which he tells the story, or you get a sense of the American story that is opened onto a broader horizon, or a transcendent orientation. It's not just the story of America as a political institution, is it?
No, it's not. And in fact, in his speeches, Sargent Shriver does from time to time talk about this, that he talks about very American values and, the Declaration of Independence, but then he goes on to say, these are universal values. We to fight for justice, to fight for liberty for every human being is something that we need to do for everyone. And to and he always underscores the fact that we truly are all connected, and to help someone else also benefits us.
Mm-hmm.
No matter where they are, whether they're inside our borders or not.
It comes out in so much of in the books, the book that you've published yourself, and the book that Jamie and Ken Melchin had published earlier. It really comes out that Sargent Shriver saw in every human being this seed spark of transcendence, and just had a remarkable way of releasing it. I mean, he talked about releasing that orientation, movement, drive toward transcendence, and he was able to do it not just at an individual level, but at a communal level. That's quite a lot to that's a lot to live up to. It's a lot to embrace. And do you find it, is it exciting, daunting? What's it like to try to carry on that legacy?
It is daunting. It is daunting. And, and it's, it's also a little bit frustrating at times, that his great accomplishments, where he really, as you say, like he unleashed, right, the power inside individuals so that they could do great things. This is what
Mm-hmm.
Jamie has shown, hundreds of students in the programs that he's done at places like the University of Chicago. But the fact that he did these things under these presidents who are seen as giants has in some ways kind of over time covered him up. So he's not as well remembered. When you think about Peace Corps, when you think about war on poverty, like normally even in the media, right, these efforts are mentioned relatively frequently. They're mentioned as accomplishments of the presidents. And so part of what I feel is frustration and a desire to show people that there was a human being who was responsible for these things, who really executed what these presidents actually prioritized.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a lot of things. It is intimidating. It can be frustrating for this reason, but it's also I also it gives me gratitude as well, because as I said, it really has transformed. It has allowed me to evolve the way I think about things, the way I think about my connections to other people and my role in the world.
And your role in the world. So the frustrating thing is it connected with your role as executive director and communications director for the institute, or is that frustration also connected somehow with your role as a citizen?
I think it's both, and my role as a citizen, I would say, this is probably not an uncommon feeling, but the feeling that there are so many things that need to be done, so many challenges, so many people living in desperate conditions in the world, and so much time and money being wasted. And as a citizen, sometimes I just feel really small. And then I think and then I feel urgency, because I think, oh, I do have this platform that I can use. And so what do I do with that? Am I doing enough? And how can we reach more people?
That's very interesting. That feeling of frustration that maybe we all have as individuals, but the power, and this also comes out right in Shriver's work. It's kind of why he it seems like a big reason why he did a lot of things he did is to create institutions so that we could unleash power together. It's almost like the power is not in the individual as much as in the community, and he's pulling the community together to help it unleash another level of transcendence.
Yes, I think you've hit upon something that is really important conceptually for Sargent Shriver, is the notion of the community. In fact, the central program in the war on poverty was and continues to be community action, right? Community action still, an influential force in the United States. There are still over 1,000 agencies of community action, and it was exactly what you've articulated, right? That you bring the people together, and they can decide what the needs are for those who have them, right? They come together and they can get what they need, whether it be for their children or for themselves, so that they can keep on going when they've been struggling.
How would Shriver answer a question like this, or how would you answer the question or the challenge that community programs are kind of small potatoes in a globalized world? What real difference can a small group of people make? And what would you say to that kind of feeling of almost despair or frustration that people might have?
Well, I would say, imagine if we all came together in our communities and then we built from that. And he may argue that we are one community, the world is one community. And so how do we manage that? We come together in our groups and we recognize the fact that we can see each other's humanity, and whatever differences there are, we are interdependent. He used this word a lot, particularly in the 70s.
Okay.
He used it,
Yep.
Speaking in the Soviet Union at the time, saying we have to move towards interdependence. I would say, we build community, and then those communities recognize how they can lean on each other until we really do have an interlocking series of communities who respect and support each other, even though they may not, have all the same, all common goals or needs,
Mhm.
but they respect each other's humanity. They recognize each other's humanity, and they come together into one thing that is greater than the sum of its parts.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, that's great. One of the things that comes to mind is that in order to really appreciate what you're saying in some sense, we have to shift our idea of what power means. So, and even when you were talking about the way in which the presidents and the lawmakers get credit for a lot of this work, and Shriver doesn't, that we have the sense that power is almost, well, increasingly understood in authoritarian terms. It's someone who dictates how things are get done, and someone who can force things to get done in the way they want. But he had a very different idea of power and how it works in society, didn't he?
Yes, he did. And I think he would say that there are limits to what you can do with force. One of my favorite quotations, actually, from Sargent Shriver is he's talking about love as a power, that we don't think of love as a power.
Hmm.
But, when you think about, and he gives like a bunch of different violent examples, napalm, right? This is during Vietnam. So, you know, and burn baby burn, he says, when you think about all these things, there are people who are turning to love as an alternative. And I know, again, it may sound woo woo, it may sound schlocky, but it's true. Like, what is it when your power is only force? You know, what is the end point? Like, where do you go? Um,
Mhm.
you know, an eye
And
for
it's
an eye makes the whole world blind.
right, right. And it certainly doesn't release that transcendence
That's right.
that Shriver was really interested in releasing.
That's right.
And
He talked about unleashing, when you free people, when you give them the opportunity that they need, the space that they need, it really does unleash a creativity and, again, a power uh, to really have a positive influence in the world.
that's great. Are there any other things that you would like, to say at this point? What's on your agenda lately, or what would you really like people to take away from, our brief conversation? And
Well, I would just love to expand our community so that we have a plurality of people who are interacting with us. And so, an easy way to do that actually is by going to our website and by connecting with us over social media. Our website is sargentshriver.org, SARGENTSHRIVER.org. And you can sign up for our newsletter there. And I think, I would like to try to do more and more interactive work with our community, and to have more exchanges so that it's not just, emails going out. It's more like, learning about what people are doing in their communities, what their concerns are, and how we can work together. It's what Sargent Shriver did to solve problems and to tackle challenges. And it's what I would like the Peace Institute to do on some larger scale as we move forward.
so it's about building relationship,
Yes, I would say so.
and you'd like to be doing that. And not, okay, that's fantastic. I'll put that also in the notes to the interview, the website
That's
address.
great.
Um, well, thank you very much
Thank you,
for
Paul.
this
This was really a
conversation.
pleasure.
It was a great pleasure. Be well.
You too.